Hey guys, what's up? It's your boy T for 365 Horror, and we are a horror movie discovery channel. I'm just here to put as many good horror movies on your watch list as possible. So today's video is going to be about every single movie I watched in July. I'm going to go over that with you guys and tell you what I rated them and what I thought of them. So hopefully you get a lot of movies on your watch list. So let's get into it right now. Now we are going to get into the video, but before we do, I've got to remind you guys to please like and subscribe if you enjoy this content. Really helps the channel out. Essentially, I've made a spreadsheet where I've broken down kind of my ratings on all the movies. I use the app Letterboxd to kind of keep a track of my watch list. It's great. You can sort movies by genre or whatever you want to do. So that's kind of what I like to use. But I still like to use my own spreadsheet because I want to give my own scores. I have my own categories, as you've seen from some of my reviews. You know, I like to keep track of how scary or creepy a movie is, so I do have that on my spreadsheet. In this video, what I'm going to do is I'm going to basically go over each movie, kind of read you the synopsis, and then read you a blurb that I wrote about it, or like a little, review. Just very short, nothing long, nothing spoiler. Because the point is for you guys to find movies to go watch. So we got a lot of movies to cover. Hopefully this doesn't end up being too long of a video. So I'm just going to get right into it. Again, I'm sorry if I'm reading at some points because there's just way too much here to really memorize. So again, I've kind of chronicled all of it, and I hope you enjoy what I've done here. I hope you enjoy learning about these movies, and if you do, just let me know in the comments if you found some good movies, or if I missed some movies. I mean, I can't really miss movies, we just watch movies, but if you think there's movies that I should be watching, like, I need to know about that, because I'm a horror fan, you're a horror fan, I just want to watch all the horror movies, man. So, with that being said, without further ado, again, this is probably going to be a little bit of a longer video for me, so I am going to get started. So the first movie I watched this month was the Amityville Exorcism. It is a straight horror movie. It was made in 2017. The synopsis reads, a family must put faith in a mysterious priest when a demonic force connected to the decades-old murders in their home possessed their daughter. Overall, I thought this movie wasn't that great. Unfortunately, my final score on this movie was going to give it a 2 out of 10. And what I had to say was the Amityville Exorcism is a terrible movie. The acting, the effects, the dialogue are bad, and it's pretty cheesy. In a weird way, it's almost funny at times, so I'm going to tell you guys don't waste your time with that one. The next movie I watched this month was The Angry Black Girl and Her Monster. This is a 2023 drama fantasy horror that I watched. The synopsis reads, Vicaria is a brilliant teenager who believes in death is a disease that can be cured. After the brutal murder of her brother, she embarks on a dangerous journey to bring him back to life. I thought this movie was kind of middle of the road. It was a little bit meh. I did end up giving this movie a 5, so I mean, it is something to watch if you have nothing else. What I said about it was I really wanted to like this film more. It starts out as a decent hood movie, but as the plot goes on, it's like the film doesn't know what it wants to be and it loses its way. Many times I feel like it struggles with identity and it enters this constant territory where it feels very Nickelodeon with its plot, but it injects this brutal gore and very serious and tragic concepts. The movie is about a girl whose brother dies and she wants to try to bring him back to life, so it does deal with a lot of kind of darker depression and stuff, but there's just certain elements about it that make it seem very like juvenile and, like I said in the review, Nickelodeon. So this is a black film that's full of references to culture and social issues. Overall, the film was just okay. Some black movies I do enjoy because I like it when it kind of pokes fun at the culture, but this one is a little too social justice-y. I just find it's a little heavy-handed with it, so again, I would only suggest that movie if you don't really have anything else to watch. The next movie I watched this month was a 1990 film by the name of Audition. I'm sure plenty of you have heard of the Asian film Audition. This is a drama horror mystery, and the synopsis reads, a widower takes an offer to screen girls at a special audition, arranged for him by a friend to find him a new wife. The one he fancies is not who she appears to be after all. The final score I'm going to give this movie is a 6.5. I know this is kind of a classic, but I'm just not sure that it aged as well as I wanted it to. Audition is a slow burn and is engaging to a degree, but I don't think the payoff is as visceral as I'd like it to be. It's a decent story with some disturbing background and a decent torture scene for sure. Most definitely it is something to watch, but like I said, it's a very slow burn, but there are some kind of disturbing concepts in the movie, things that happen to the characters that actually make you cringe a little bit. So if you haven't watched this movie, it is definitely a movie to watch. Next, we're going to move on to a movie called The Bell Witch Haunting. This is a 2013 movie. They describe it as a biography horror, which, because I think it is based on true events. The Robertson County Sheriff's Department released found footage of what was thought at first to be a murder-suicide, but is now believed to be the return of a centuries-old demon responsible for America's famous paranormal event. Overall, I thought this movie was actually pretty good, just because it had some good scares in it. I gave it a 7, which is, in my rating system, a good movie. The Bell Witch Haunting is a good found footage film. It's eventful and chock full of jump scares and definitely has some creepy moments. It has a good payoff in the end, because sometimes I find that found footage movies, they have tons of lead up and then it's like a 2-minute ending. It just isn't, they don't always have the payoff that I would like them to have. So I did find that this movie did have actually a good payoff. It suffers from bad decision syndrome at time, which does annoy me. Kills off camera, bad decisions, comedy of errors. I just don't like any of that stuff. So by bad decision syndrome, I mean, you're by yourself, you know the house is haunted, you hear noises in the basement. Why would you go down there by yourself? Like, I just don't understand why you would do that. And it always kind of pulls me out of the movie when I find myself asking why the characters are doing what they're doing. So that part of it I didn't enjoy. This movie is a good watch, but it falls just short of something I'd put in my collection. Again, it had decent scares and actually creepy, which is what I look for in a horror movie. I do like the paranormal stuff. So again, this is a good movie and something that if you haven't seen it, you might be worth a watch. Next, we're going to look at a comedy horror that I watched called The Boys from County Hell. This is a 2020 movie, and the synopsis reads, a crew of hardy road workers, led by a bickering father and son, must survive the night when they accidentally awaken an Irish vampire. All in all, I thought that this movie was a little bit of a waste of time, unfortunately, and I did give it a 4, which means that it's not that great, but it did have little elements that I did enjoy. I thought that it suffers from the usual horror comedy syndrome where it's just not creepy and scary enough. It's a decent movie otherwise. I'd rate it 5 to a 5.5 if you like horror comedy. Again, I'm not a huge fan of horror comedy, so it did come up short for me. If I am going to enjoy a horror comedy, it either has to be like really funny. I like ones that are super gross, because I find that often, like if it's a comedy, they'll put like ultra disgusting gore in it, but this one didn't have much of any of it. So overall, like I said, 4 out of 10. You can decide if you want to watch it. The next movie I watched this month was The Blackening. It is a 2022/2023 film. I'm sure most outlets are going to say it was released in 2023. This is a comedy horror thriller, and it is about 7 black friends who go away for the weekend and end up trapped in a cabin with a killer who has a vendetta. Will their street smarts and knowledge of horror movies help them stay alive? Probably not. So when it comes to The Blackening, I definitely thought that this was a good movie. I gave it a 7 out of 10. So this is definitely something that you should watch. There may be small caveats. The Blackening is a good comedy horror, especially if you like black commentary and comedy. Now, I say that because it does have a lot of that. So if you don't like hood humor, a bunch of N-bombs, they say nigga every 2 minutes. Hey, what's up, my nigga? Hey, what are you doing, nigga? Which kind of is how we talk to each other. So I did like the authenticity as far as culturally. It's purposely heavy-handed, and it's successful in a lot of the laughs. And again, I say heavy-handed because they just pile on kind of the black stereotype jokes, but it's done in a funny way. Like, me and my girl were watching this, and a lot of the times I found that it's actually things that we like do or say, of course to the extreme, but still, it was rooted in that bit of reality, which kind of made it interesting. It's very narrative driven and falls back on numerous stereotypes, but in a funny and authentically black way. Aside from a handful of jump scares, you won't really find anything scary or creepy in this movie, but for me, the comedy held up. The difference between a movie like this and The Black Girl and Her Monster, I found, is that The Black Girl and Her Monster, they kind of was more social, right? Like, oh, you know how slavery was, and they kept us as slaves. Like, it's more social commentary. Oh, well, we're all in this hood because we're held down. Like, whereas in The Blackening, I didn't find any of that. It was just more poking fun at black culture, things we do. There's one part where, like, a white deputy comes and he's talking to 3 of the 6, and he's like, where's the rest of you? And then they're like, oh, we split up. And he's like, but you're black. Why would you split up? Because, you know, black people in horror movies are like, why would you do that? You know, we're constantly like, why? I'm out of there at the first sight of anything. So I did think it was funny the way they kind of poked holes in those. Even when they decide to split up, it's like, like they're all just like, why are we doing this? It's just really good. I like the commentary that they decided to go through with the comedy. Much better than the heavy-handed kind of social justice angle. So all in all, especially if you like black comedy, again, you're going to hear tons of N-bombs and stuff like that. But if that doesn't bother you, then definitely you should see this movie. Next movie I watched was a horror thriller, and it was called Discarnate. It's a 2018 movie. It's about a neuroscientist's obsession with the drug that expands the human mind inadvertently and unleashes a deadly supernatural force on the team. Overall, I've got to give Discarnate, this was not the greatest movie. Again, I had to just give it a 4, which, I mean, isn't a complete waste of time, but it's just not a movie I could wholeheartedly suggest. Now, if you're like me and you've watched everything, maybe a 4, you're like, I'll check it out. This guy doesn't know what he's talking about. So I would suggest that. The movies that I would suggest to not watch are ones that I like 1, 2, like those are just bad. But sometimes a 4 is subjective to different people. Some people would give Midsommar a 4. I give Midsommar an 8. Same with Hereditary. So it really depends on what you're looking for. I thought that Discarnate had a decent story, but overall was just a forgettable movie. Slow pacing, small budget, and mediocre acting ruined this one from being enjoyable, and for me, it just is not worth a watch, but again, you're gonna make your own decision. The next movie I watched was another 2023 straight horror, and it was Evil Dead Rise. And this movie is a twisted tale of 2 estranged sisters whose reunion is cut short by the rise of flesh-possessing demons, thrusting them into a primal battle for survival as they face the most nightmarish version of family imaginable. I thought this movie was meh, but it did have some good elements to it, and I did end up giving it a 6 out of 10. Evil Dead Rise is a decent movie, but suffers from being way too Hollywood cliche. It has a heavy-handedness when it comes to its brand of horror, and it almost holds it back from being actually scary. It has some decent gore, but overall it misses on being the sequel that I wish it was. Now, I know that that's going to be some kind of nostalgic bias for me, because I guess I'll just give the example of like a movie like Venom. Venom is great if it's alien symbiote from space, right? But as soon as you tie it to Venom and make it a Spider-Man movie, then we all have expectations of what that should be, or what the character should be, or how they should act, or, you know, certain things. For me, when I hear about Evil Dead or any of its sequels, I want it to feel like it's tying together with the original source material. I understand that they had a couple little nods and stuff like that, but overall it just didn't really feel like an Evil Dead movie to me. There's nothing inherently wrong with that. I mean, like, you could have just called it Evil Dead, or I don't know. You could have called it anything but Evil Dead, and it would have been a pretty decent movie. It's got good gore. It's got some good jump scares. It's okay. It's like I said, it's got some original elements that aren't bad, but overall, just tying it to the Evil Dead franchise probably is why I only gave it a 6 and not 7. I mean, if you don't have that nostalgia, then this is definitely something you might want to like check out. Next movie I watched was a 2017 horror thriller called Get Out. I'm sure everybody's heard of this movie. It's not my first time watching it, but I want to give all the movies a fresh watch so that I can just give like a true rating and perspective that I have of that moment for my spreadsheet. Because, you know, there's a lot of legacy scores, right? Like, if, for an example, like Nightmare on Elm Street Part 1, that might have a legacy score of 8 to me. But if I watch it today with like an objective mind, it probably gets like a 4, it's cheesy, it's old, etc. Even though I think it's a classic masterpiece. So I'm just watching everything with a fresh eye and a little bit more critical instead of just like taking it in. So that's why I really wanted to rewatch Get Out. This is a movie about a young African-American who visits his white girlfriend's parents for the weekend, where his simmering uneasiness about their reception of him eventually reaches a boiling point. Now, this is a Jordan Peele movie, so I mean, this is a pretty polarizing movie, but to me, this was a good movie. I would give this movie a 7 out of 10. Get Out has great acting and a strong plot. Although it's not exactly scary, it's still interesting and a compelling story from Jordan Peele. It has a decently strong black narrative without being overly social justice based. A lot of the references and nods to black culture are spot on in this movie, and I don't feel like they are trying too hard. It has a good twist, and the movie overall keeps you guessing and engaged, and I would say that this is a good watch. So Yeah, this is definitely one that if you haven't seen it, you should watch it. It's a good movie, and yeah, throw it on your watch list. Next, I watched another comedy horror, and I can't believe there's so many comedy horrors. I didn't realize it until I started watching movies at random. I didn't realize how many comedy horrors there are. I just usually stray away from them. I don't enjoy them, but some of them are enjoyable. And one that I did find kind of enjoyable was the 2019 film named Harpoon. This film is about rivalries, dark secrets, and sexual tension emerge when three best friends find themselves stranded on a yacht in the middle of an ocean, desperate for survival. All in all, I thought this was a good movie, and I definitely think it's worth a watch. Unless you hate comedy horror, then maybe you won't enjoy this movie, but I actually gave this movie a 7. I thought it was good. Harpoon is the type of comedy horror that reminds me that there are good movies in the comedy horror genre. It has smart writing and good characters. The humor is witty and subtle, so it's not overt or slapstick. Not only does it have decent humor, but it's mixed with a good story and a plot that keeps you wondering where the movie will end up. The gore is small but effective, and all in all, this is a good comedy horror. So next, I watched the 2013 horror movie The Haunting in Connecticut 2, Ghosts of Georgia. This is a drama horror mystery. This movie is about a young family that moves into a historic home in Georgia, only to learn that they are not the house's only inhabitants. Soon they find themselves in the presence of a secret rising from underground and threatening to bring down anyone in its path. The Haunting in Connecticut, Ghosts of Georgia, I thought this was an okay movie, and I did end up giving it a 6 out of 10. Haunting 2 is a good horror movie with a classic feel. It is chock full of jump scares, and the black slavery story actually isn't bad. It has no elements of 2023 pandering. You can tell this is a 2013 movie. It just tells the story. Some minor creeps make this a worthwhile ghost story to watch. Like I said, it does have some creepiness to it. I am a paranormal guy, so I did find this movie to be pretty okay. Something definitely on your watch list if you do like ghosts and paranormal movies. The next movie I watched was another comedy horror, and that is In Fabric. In Fabric is a haunting ghost story set against the backdrop of a busy winter sales period in a department store, and follows the life of a cursed dress as it passes from person to person with devastating consequences. Overall, I didn't love this movie. From what I wrote, it's very short, so maybe I was tired when I watched it, but I didn't love the movie, and I only gave it a 4 out of 10. I thought it was a little bit mad, had a couple of little original elements. It was a weird movie. It has a level of unique to the story, but I didn't connect with it as a horror. It just was a little bit too weird for me. It jumped a little bit too much. It just wasn't one of my favorite movies, but again, if you're a fan of just ultra weird movies, then you might actually enjoy this one, so throw it on your watch list. Next, I watched a crime horror movie. It is another 2023 movie, and this one was a good one. This one is called Little Bone Lodge. This movie is set during a very vicious storm. Two criminal brothers on the run seek refuge in a desolate farmhouse. Taking the resident family captive, they find the house holds dark secrets of its own. This was a really good movie. Even though it didn't scare me a ton, I actually really enjoyed this movie. It's a movie I suggest you watch. I would maybe even own it, and I gave this one a 7.5. This is a really good movie. Even though it's light on the scares, it's a great thrill ride. Well acted with an outstanding and dark story. It keeps you on the edge of your seat with plenty of twists and turns. I 100% suggest Little Bone Lodge. So this is a movie you definitely got to throw on your watch list. Again, if you're kind of more into the crime horror, it's just great, man. The way the story goes, it's just super dark. Even everything that happens and goes on in the movie, it's just a really good movie that kind of kept me engaged the whole time. One for your watch list for sure. Next, I watched a horror mystery, and this was a 2022 film named Malak. The synopsis for this movie reads, Beatrix lives on the edge of a bog in the Netherlands when she and her family are attacked by a stranger one night. Beatrix sets out to find an explanation, and she discovers that something is chasing her. I actually thought, even though again I must have watched this when I was tired because it's a very short kind of blurb, but I actually thought Malak was a pretty good movie, and I did give it a 6.5, so it is a movie that's something to watch. All I wrote down here was a decent movie with a few light scares, enjoyed the ending. So I'm sure the ending must have had some sort of twist to it or something to it that made me kind of like it. So that is definitely a movie you should throw on your watch list and check out. Next, I watched another drama horror. This one's from 2006. 2007, and it is called The Orphanage. The synopsis reads, a woman brings her family back to her childhood home, which used to be an orphanage for handicapped children. Before long, her son starts to communicate with a new invisible friend. In the end, I did find that The Orphanage was another good movie to watch. I did give it a 6.5 out of 10. It starts out as a slow burn, but it morphs into something quite good. It has some creeps and scares, but you can most def tell at this point that the movie is a little bit dated. And by that I mean some of the set design are maybe not so much the set design, but the music, especially the way it kind of builds music. I don't know, if you watch like a 2000 horror, just the music even tells you it's 2007 nowadays. So a really good character revelation brings the movie together in the end. So I love movies like that where I'm just like, shit, at the end of it, you know what I mean? And this movie kind of was one like that. So definitely, if you haven't seen The Orphanage, throw that one on your watch list. Next, I watched another 2023 film, and that is the Russell Crowe movie, The Popes Exorcist. The synopsis reads, follow Gabriel Amort, the Vatican's leading exorcist, as he investigates the possession of a child and uncovers the conspiracy the Vatican tried to keep secret. The Popes Exorcist, again, I gave this one a decent with good elements kind of score. Personally, I found this movie to be a 5.5, but I could see people who are fans of exorcism movies giving this movie a 6 or a 6.5. So it definitely is something that's kind of worth the watch. The Pope's Exorcist is a passable movie. It follows the usual exorcism tropes, and I just didn't feel like it brought anything new or visceral to the table. I didn't love the kid's acting, as you've seen in my review. I felt like his demonic anger was forced. All in all, you're getting a good Hollywood blockbuster budget, but it's way too cliche. I prefer exorcist movies to reach for a little bit more realism. Could be a decent popcorn movie if you do like exorcist films. So a lot of people did kind of enjoy this movie. Like I said, I didn't find it a waste of time, but it's not something that I would like watch again. So again, I gave it a 6, 5.5 to a 6. Something to watch for sure. Moving right along, we're going to get to another horror mystery that I watched. This is another 2023 film, and this one is called Pollen. And I'm sure this one's going to be polarizing because, again, it's a really weird film. So you're just like Midsommar and Hereditary, you're going to have lovers and haters. I, for one, didn't mind this movie. The synopsis reads, after a senior coworker assaults a bright-eyed young woman, her dream job becomes a living nightmare as she tries to keep her career together while being tormented at work, home, and in her dreams by a mysterious tree monster. Now, this is going to be very polarizing again because there's some people who are going to be like, what the fuck, man? This movie sucked ass. Whereas I actually thought the movie was pretty good, and I did end up giving it a 6.5, which is kind of between like a good movie, like a decent movie and a good movie. I did think it was okay. Pollen is an interesting movie, but not really a horror like you'd think. It's basically a psychotic break, and Ava Rose Kennard makes the movie by playing it perfectly. It's got a weird and obscure kind of vibe, and the awkward moments made me cringe in real life. It kept me engaged and wondering where its plot would take it, even though it's not really scary or creepy. If you're a fan of artsy films that display horror in a different but visceral way, you might enjoy Pollen. This movie is kind of borders on like more of a mental health thing, and like I said in my little review there, her psychotic break makes the movie. I do like how she kind of starts breaking. I like the way they portray it. I like the awkward moments in it. It really gives you a sense of the character, and I like awkwardness. Like, I like 90 Day Fiancé type shows where you can cut the awkward with a knife, you know what I mean? So I actually thought this movie was pretty good. I am going to warn you that if you're not a fan of weird films or non-traditional horror, you're probably going to think this movie is trash. But if you do have kind of an open mind and do want to watch something unique and weird, give Pollen a watch. The next movie I watched is an action horror movie, and it is called The Price We Pay. It is a 2022 film, and it was okay. The synopsis reads, after a pawn shop robbery goes askew, two criminals take refuge at a remote farmhouse to try to let the heat die down, but find something much more menacing. Now, I actually thought The Price We Pay was a good movie. I gave this movie a 7 out of 10. The Price We Pay is a good torture gore film with loose elements of a backwoods redneck vibe, but not fit really, just because it kind of had an isolated feel to it. It was more about experiments, so it wasn't really backwoods, but it still had that feel to it. Stephen Dorff, who will forever be Deacon Frost and Blade to me, loans his talents to the decently acted film. This action horror is filled with good practical gore and a plot that starts quickly and is decent throughout. This is a good movie for the subgenre. Again, everything is going to be subjective, but I actually enjoyed this movie. Again, it was a movie that kind of had me on the edge of my seat wondering how it was going to end up, so I actually thought it wasn't too bad. And if you do like some action kind of crime horror, definitely check out The Price We Pay. The next movie I watched was another 2023 movie. This one is being described as a thriller, but on my app, I usually just sort by horror. I don't even include thriller, and this did come up, so I do feel like it had some horror survival elements to it, and that is the movie Quicksand. The synopsis on this one reads, follows a married couple almost divorcing who become trapped in quicksand when hiking through a rainforest in Colombia. They will battle the elements of the jungle and must work together in order to survive. All in all, Quicksand is going to get a very meh score from me. It was very middle of the road. I usually like survival horrors, so I'm surprised that this one, it just didn't really resonate with me. Quicksand starts out good, but it doesn't bring anything original to the table. Worst is, it falls apart in the third act. It just doesn't push any boundaries of survival, and the plot elements that push it are just way too flawed and unbelievable to ignore. I don't want to get into it because, again, I don't want to really spoil the movie, but in the third act, they kind of solve the problems, and the solutions are ridiculous. Like, solution after solution, I just sat there and I was like, fuck that. There's just no way that she's gonna fucking be able to do that. Like, even though this movie kind of had a strong female lead, I was just like, I don't know. You have to really suspend disbelief. And this is coming from someone who watched Evil Dead Rise, where they bring out the Necronomicon and people are possessed and they kill like a whole floor of a building. Like, it's just, I don't know, something about it. It just was a giant eye roll the entire wrap up of this movie. But I did give it a 5 because the beginning, it does start out promising, and some of the situations are interesting. One thing that I was when I was talking to my girl was, I'm surprised that when I was a kid, I feel like quicksand was something that I was supposed to encounter like a lot more in my life. Like, I remember it was always a conversation like, well, you know, when you're in quicksand, you're supposed to stay still, right? You're supposed to reach for a branch. Like, I just remember I thought quicksand was going to be a bigger problem. And I've never even come across quicksand. So seeing what it was in this movie, it was kind of interesting just to see them trapped in the quicksand and how they were. But again, some of the plot elements were just way too ridiculous to be taken seriously. But at a 5 out of 10, it is something to watch if you just have nothing else to watch. All right, guys, we are coming to the end of this, and I'm going to go over, I've only got a few more movies left, so I hope you found some good movies to add to your watch list so far. The next movie I watched this month was the 2017 film Revenge. This is another action horror, and the synopsis reads, never take your mistress on an annual guy's getaway, especially one devoted to hunting. A violent lesson for 3 wealthy married men. I thought that Revenge was an okay movie. It was something to watch. I ended up giving it a 6 out of 10. This movie is a pretty good revenge tale. Its main character, Jen, is pretty badass in this movie, so you definitely get a strong female lead. Some good bloody kills accompany some painful, gory moments. Nothing groundbreaking, but this is a great popcorn movie, so if you just want to see like a chick kick some ass, definitely check out Revenge. Next movie I watched, we're going to get into a 2007 comedy horror film that I watched called Teeth. The synopsis, vagina dentata. I don't know, that just... Vagina dentata makes me laugh. So the synopsis reads, still a stranger to her own body, a high school student discovers she has a physical advantage when she becomes the object of male violence. So Teeth, I thought, was, again, a passable movie, something to watch. It did have some good kind of laughs and gore in it. I did end up giving this movie a 6 out of 10. Teeth is a horror comedy that hits on some good horror notes without being too cheesy or zany. Because, you know, that's one of my worries about horror comedies, that we're going to watch something like, I mean, this is a good movie in retrospect, but like Dead Alive, right? Where it's just so zany. You're like, there's nothing horror here. This is comedy. It's got plenty of beans and franks, meaning cock and balls, and in this movie, and it usually makes for some painful and gross moments. So here's my thing. I find that whenever they do show full frontal on a guy, so whenever you're seeing like straight up cock and balls, it's always like a super raw movie. I feel like if you're going to have that in it, it's like now you can have all this stuff in it. You know what I mean? Like, you know how when you hear PG-13, they can say fuck once or whatever the parameters are. Well, I feel like once you show cock and balls, then you can show lots more. And oh my God, do they just show some, like, she has vagina dentata. Like, her vagina has teeth. So you can already guess some of the gory shit you're going to see in this movie. While this movie doesn't have buckets of gore, what you do see is effective. John Hensley plays his archetype character role, asshole, perfectly. I will give you warning though, if you are triggered or bothered by SA, which I'm sure we all know what that is, then this movie might not be for you because it does have an uncomfortable kind of SA moment in it. But otherwise, it's a decent horror movie and something to watch. Again, if you like horror comedies, vagina dentata, I definitely suggest that you watch this movie. It's kind of ridiculous, but it was kind of funny all the same. The last movie I watched this month, again, another comedy horror. Like I said, I didn't know that so many movies were comedy horrors. I usually stay far away from them. And only until I was like on Letterboxd, you can sort your list in a number of ways. And so I'll usually just shuffle it and then I'll just watch what comes up because I just want to see movies. Like, I want to see movies that I would normally not watch. So the last movie I watched this month was another comedy horror, and it is the 2014 film called Tusk. The synopsis reads, a brash and arrogant podcaster gets more than he bargained for when he travels to Canada to interview a mysterious recluse who has a rather disturbing fondness for walruses. Now, I thought this movie was passable. I did give it a 6 out of 10. Tusk is a grisly torture body horror story. It's weird, but in an interesting way, only to be held back by some plot dragging through long monologues. Now, there's a lot of long monologues in this movie. It features some grisly moments while holding up the expectation that incredibly fucking bad things will always happen to Justin Long in horror movies. So if you want to see Justin Long be tortured yet again, then Tusk is a good, weird, gross body horror movie for you. It ends really weird. It just is, the motivations are weird, but it is something good and weird to watch. So I suggest you think about putting that one on your watch list. All right, guys, that's going to do it for this every single movie I watched this month. I do hope that you like this content, and if you did, please like and subscribe. I know that this one was kind of all over the place because this is my first time really filming one of these. I filmed one a few months ago, but I didn't really go into this much depth with my little mini reviews. I'm not going to review every movie, which was my plan in the beginning. I'm only going to review the really, really good movies. So this is a way for me to kind of give you my reviews and scores on subpar movies or movies that weren't good or movies to avoid without making it an individual video, because I just find that that's kind of a waste of time. The next ones are going to be a lot more cohesive and well done. So if you did stick with me this long, I do appreciate you, as I kind of found my formula for this video format, which I will be doing every single month, and hopefully I will get as many movies under my belt as I did this month. Thanks a lot for joining me. Tell me what kind of movies you watched this month, what movies I should watch. I always love suggestions from you guys. I've watched a few pretty good movies more underground shit that I've never heard of. That's kind of what I want to see. So all the mainstream stuff, fuck, I see the trailers, I see it all. So ones like this are kind of appreciated, like I said, and that's why I hope that some of you guys really appreciated this list and appreciated maybe some of the less known horrors. You know, I purposely kind of go shuffle because I do want to see older movies. So you got some 2007, some 2010, you know what I mean? Not just all the newest stuff that's kind of boring. Like, hopefully you guys found some underground gems to watch in this video. So thank you for watching and making it through this whole video with me, and I will see you guys in the next one. Peace.